Hello, my fairies. So, tonight I am walking right now to this beautiful pond in my fairy village, and I thought I would just sit by the pond and talk about some of my favorite scary movies. So, this video will be about some of my favorite slashers. Now, slashers are not my favorite subgenre of horror. My favorite subgenre of horror is actually paranormal, but I do watch slashers from time to time, and I have come up with a lot of my favorite ones. My top two favorite slashers, and in my opinion, the best slashers that are out there of all time, is Pearl and X. And yes, I have seen Maxine too, but I don't think that Maxine is as good as Pearl and X. So Pearl, X, and Maxine are part of a trilogy. All three movies were directed by Ty West, which I love him. He's a great movie director. He also directed The Innkeepers and The House of the Devil. And the trilogy begins with the movie Pearl, which takes place in 1918 on a farm in Texas. And the main character is a young woman named Pearl, and she is played by Mia Goth. Basically, her father is paraplegic and she is taking care of him. So she is feeding him, bathing him, and she's also doing her duties on the farm, like feeding the animals. And she wants to leave the farm to become a star. However, her mother is very harsh and she does not want Pearl to leave. They are living in very tough times. It takes place during the Spanish flu pandemic, and they don't have much money, so her mom believes that it's best for her to work on the farm. And Pearl basically goes crazy. And it's basically the origin story of a killer, and you will see some kills. And the cool thing about Pearl is that all of the kills take place during the day. Also, the movie can be compared to The Wizard of Oz in terms of the visuals. Now, X takes place on the same farm all the way in 1979. So X takes place 61 years later, and Ty West does a very good job, in my opinion, of setting the scene and making it really feel like the 70s. He does a very good job of that in terms of the aesthetics of the whole entire movie. And this movie takes heavy inspiration from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I love. I love that movie too. I'll get into that later. But X is about a group of young adult filmmakers who want to shoot an adult film on Pearl's farm. So it is now that we find out that Pearl never got to leave the farm. So at the end of Pearl, her husband, Howard, who was serving in one of the world wars, had returned. And so now in X, Howard and Pearl are an elderly couple still living on the farm, and the young adult filmmakers are coming to shoot the movie there. But Pearl and Howard don't know that these young adults are shooting an adult film. And Pearl is still stuck in her ways, and she has not gotten rid of her habit of killing people. And the reason that X and Pearl are my two favorite slashers of all time is because of how it comes full circle. And I also love Mia Goth. I think she's a great actress. She plays both Pearl and Maxine. Maxine is one of the adult actresses in X, and she wants to become famous just like Pearl. But Mia Goth also plays young Pearl and old Pearl. So she plays young Pearl in Pearl, and she plays old Pearl and Maxine in X, and obviously she plays Maxine in Maxine. And the reason that I love X so much, one of the reasons, is because the story comes full circle at the end. And I'm not going to spoil the ending because it's one of the best horror film endings of all time, in my opinion. I also really love the music and the aesthetic of the 70s. I love that song that played during one of the kills, Don't Fear the Reaper. Love that song. And I also love how there are a lot of Easter eggs in Pearl and X. One other thing I love about the two movies is a parallel that in Pearl, all of the kills take place during the day, and in X, all of the kills take place during the night. So that's a cool parallel between the movies. And I'm not going to talk about Maxine because I didn't really like that movie. That's the third installment, which takes place after X. So the order goes Pearl, X, Maxine, and I recommend watching it in that order. So the next really good slasher that I like to call it a psychological slasher, but it's Saw. I'm sure you guys have all heard of Saw. And I've only seen the first movie, the second movie, and part of Spiral, but I'm going to keep watching and I will update this list. But in my opinion, so far from what I have seen, the first Saw movie is the best. Love it. You gotta check it out. And I'm very squeamish. I don't really like torture in film, and I also really don't like gore that much. So even when I was mentioning the X and Pearl series, it's gory, but I'm the type of person who always has to cover my eyes during those parts. And so for me to like a slasher film, it has to have a good backstory. And that is why I love Ty West's films like Pearl and X. Now, the cool thing about Saw is that it has an amazing backstory and it just goes deeper and deeper. Even though you don't necessarily agree with Jigsaw, you understand why he does what he does, and the story is very interesting. I think he is one of the most interesting killers, if you can even call him that, because he makes his victims kill themselves under the illusion that they have a choice, and the choices are very unpleasant. In the film, these cops are trying to solve the mystery of the Jigsaw killer, who tests his victims by putting them through deadly games, and he carefully contrives and creates these contraptions in which his victims have to inflict immense physical pain on themselves or others in order to escape. It is very messed up, but it's not as gory as it seems, especially the first film. And the way he chooses his victims is he chooses people who he perceives as being sinners. Sometimes he will choose criminals, people who are cheating on their spouses, people who want to end their lives, which is pretty sad. The Jigsaw killer is a very intelligent man, and he is probably, in my opinion, one of the most intelligent horror movie villains. And the ending of the first Saw movie is amazing. Best horror movie ending ever. I say that for so many movies, but seriously, the ending of the first Saw movie is amazing. If you have seen it, please tell me what you think. Oh, and the Saw series was directed by James Wan, who also directed the Conjuring series. He's a great director. Okay, so now I'm going to rapid fire through my favorite horror movie classics. So when I mention these movies, I am talking about the originals. And yes, most of these movies take place before the 2000s. So we got some 1970s movies, we got some 80s, 90s. So I love Scream, Halloween, American Psycho, Nightmare on Elm Street, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Sleepaway Camp. So sorry if I sounded horrible during this video. I'm still sick with a cold, so I know I sound gross. So those are some of my favorite slashers so far. What are your favorite horror movie slashers? Please share in the comment section below, and have a good night, fairies!